Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He is the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you, like our gold supporter, the 7th Annual Super Brain Summit at Bradley University, and our silver supporter, Mind Media. Join us at the 7th Annual Super Brain Summit at Bradley University Center for Collaborative Brain Research. It's featuring speaker Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor. She's the author of The Grieving Brain, The Surprising Science of How We Learn from Our Love and Loss. If you want to get more information regarding registration, contact Gwen Hoarter. She's at GHOWARTER at bradley.edu or call her at 309-677-3900. If you want more information regarding programming, you can contact Dr. Lori Russell Chapin herself at 309-677-3186 or email lar@bradley.edu. Mindmedia.com. Get the latest EEG and neurofeedback technology from mindmedia.com. Their semi-dry sensor cap is a wonder to see, and their EEG amplifiers have been trusted in the field for decades. Their neurofeedback and QEEG courses will get you up to speed in no time. Visit mindmedia.com now. What's on your mind this week, Jay?
Oh, I've been seeing all sorts of chats about AI and that is on my mind, and then the Neuralink, the Elon Musk's attempt to monitoring and stimulation into brains, the foundation of brain-computer interface, back to my old friend Birbaumer. Brain-computer interface goes way back. Birbaumer was publishing on that back in the 90s, and lots of publications, academic publications, and large N25, people that had brain-computer interface from the outside, not something implanted, but something outside, basically from surface EEG. And
how would that work? Like, why did they do that?
Well, they were getting people that had motor restrictions like ALS and paralysis, so you couldn't,
So you're trying to connect the dots. You're trying to help connect the dots.
Yeah, and basically the person can type on the computer by just straight from brain activity, and that allows them to end up controlling environmental things like water supply to a tube so they can drink, the temperature in the room, whether there's a fan on or not, channel the TV is on. I mean, all the kind of things you'd normally be able to control with kind of like a mouse, clicking or pointing, you can end up doing with brain-computer interface on a computer, and that's from surface EEG, and this goes back a long ways, like I say, and 25 ALS style cases that all could end up typing and texting, essentially. His work wasn't, it was a small university, Tübingen University. It's an old university. It's where circadian rhythms were first discovered, but it's an academic, classical university, and he ran the EEG biofeedback department, and used slow cortical potential feedback, looking at infralow, infraslow, 1 hertz and below activity, basically. and he had people trained to run a Pong type game. There's, instead of Pong hitting something back, they were flying rocket ships across the screen and flying it through a window, and you could speed up the speed of the rocket ship, which would randomly pick a trajectory and the size of the window to make it more and more complex. But you now see, them with a monkey playing Pong, but that's now with an implanted BCI. But this isn't that impressive, a step up. And Musk's group was intending to be implanting in ALS patients by now, but the FDA denied them permission because they were too sloppy. Remember Musk's statement about, going real fast and blowing things up? That's a great way to develop rockets, but it kind of sucks as a way to develop a brain interface. They were fast and sloppy, and UC Davis canceled their contract with them. They had a primate laboratory at UC Davis, and they canceled the contract with them because they were fast and sloppy. The Mac monkey has a disease, and it's transmissible. And once you implant the brain-computer interface in, if you take it out, it's contaminated, and you don't want to end up with, a problem being exposed to it. So there's standards for how that can be handled, what kind of packaging and what kind of labeling and all of that. And they were cutting corners and basically, toss it in a FedEx envelope and send it off. Basically, no multiple containments and proper labeling and all of that.
Well, so let's just say they get a cleaning service and they work on their hygiene. Then what else is the problem with those guys?
Well, it's going to they're going to have to end up with a laboratory that they work with that ends up agreeing to working with them. But they're intending to implant into a human, and again, they were denied already. Now they say they're reapplying and they're hoping to do one sometime by this fall. But I don't know that their problems are going to be remediated fully by then. It's hard to say, but implants into brains have been done already. Synchron does implants, and instead of Musk has this fabulous machine, kind of like a sewing machine and a microscope added together. That they merge in the back lab at night, and this thing came out in the morning that you could surgically implant threads of thousands of electrodes on these threads, along the cortex. And so that's how Musk wants to get his electrodes in there. But that requires a neurosurgeon coming and drilling a freaking hole in your head and then going in and then sliding these wires, along the surface. And that's all fine and dandy, but it's not the only way to get something in there. Synchron does it with stents. That they go through the carotid and they take a vascular stent, something that opens up and keeps a blood vessel open, and that becomes an electrode. So they've got their own approach using different technologies, and they've done very nicely I believe they've got 4 cases so far done in humans. So there are people that are talking about uh, dust, little tiny nano body amplifiers that you can just float in and inject them in and let them float into wherever they float into. And once they're there, you identify where they are, turn them on, you power them up using ultrasound. You have a little ultrasound field, and they're powered up, and you locate them in 3-dimensional space, and you know where you're recording from. So there's a lot of different ways that people are talking about getting in to do not just monitoring, but also manipulation of brain activity. And the Neuralink is the most oriented towards the manipulation because their intent is to stimulate, not just record. And most of the rest of these are brain-computer interface recording. Now, for BCI, there's a whole concern over ethics and side attacks, how you can actually hack into people's cognitive process enough to start to guess passwords and things. So, when somebody's got a brain-computer interface in, there's a whole neural ethics that still needs to be developed.
Like Facebook?
Well, AI needs to have AI ethics development as well. But that the technology usually is done and out there before we start to regulate it. We're still trying to regulate phones like they had cords on them or something, So the regulators end up being kind of behind the curve. They're trying to tidy up afterwards, So, but brain-computer interface is going to end up having a lot of ethics issues, especially when you're talking about stimulating the brain to manipulate the brain. The hows and whys and whos on that end up being critical, mission critical.
The implants for people with Parkinson's, that's a positive, right?
Oh yeah. I had a friend who I knew him in town, a little town of 3,000 something people. Everybody in town. You see them. You don't necessarily know them in depth, but you kind of know who they are, or they know who you are. And he was a runner. We would see him run all the time through town. And over the years, he started to slow down, and then I saw him walking, and then I saw his shuffle with his hands up and trembling, and I say, "Oh my goodness, this is really advanced Parkinsonism." And he's still fairly young man, and I talked to him, and he knew I was in neuroscience, and he asked me about the deep brain implants, and they were still fairly new at that time. And knowing a fair amount about it already, I suggested to him that he go ahead and consider that, because at some point his ability to even shuffle and walk is going to degrade, and he'll start to fall. And at that point, you don't want to fall and break your head open, and go in, get the implant, and free yourself of the frozen postures and tremors and the hunched over, shuffly gait and all of that. And 6 months later, I see him jogging in town again. I pull over and say, "Hey, I have the implant. Everything's back. I'm back to jogging." And he was a happy camper.
How long does that last?
It some of the very early ones that were put in were not done with the more advanced technologies that they have now. Yeah, first of all, Parkinsonism isn't something you have when you're 2. It's something you have when you're 72. So, and it happens. You can start to detect it in the 50s, but most of the diagnosis is in their 60s and early 70s. So, if the implant lasts your lifetime, it's not necessarily having to last that damn long. Uh, you're already quite a ways towards the end of the race. So at this point, modern implants last as long as the patient's going to last, and the thing that they implant has dramatically changed over time. The initial implants were uh, basically pretty crude, and the what they were stimulating was quite often just DC, and to potentiate or depotentiate a function in an area. Uh, Dirk de Ritter invented burst mode stimulation, where you actually are turning on and off and stimulating with a pattern a pattern of spikes, basically. And he moved the frequency of that up into the 600 to 1,000 cyclosecond range, so you can mimic spike trains in neurons. And he also has also added in a noise stimulation. And you think noise, how can that be helpful? But adding a little bit of noise into a system helps with resolution. And the noise that they put in are pink noise and brown noise. White noise is really high frequency, really noisy. If you take the high frequency and roll off the high frequency, that's a pink noise. And if you really roll it off fast, that's a brown noise. So it's more, softer, deeper sorts of noise. And those mimic noise within the system. So he's trying to match the stimulation to the kinds of signals that you'd see in the systems. They're also adding AI onto the chips, and they're able to measure or record the EEG when it's implanted. So things have moved a lot since the initial early implants, and all for the better. And at this point, in the Sassoon City meeting, Dirk de Ritter, MD, PhD neurosurgeon, who does these implants and has invented all of these high fancy stimulation technologies and so forth, will be discussing the implants and the ethics of it and all of that. The ability to actually replay spike trains that you record is essentially able to kind of implant a memory. So, which starts to sound like Total Recall, memory implants and whatnot. So, but by the time you're talking about brain stimulation and control of the brain from the brain-computer interface outside in, that starts to look a little bit more like Starlink, So
right.
So the but as I say, the ethics of all of this has to be developed kind of as we are developing the technologies. We're developing the ethics and how to do this, and and whether it should be done at all.
Join us at the 7th Annual Super Brain Summit at Bradley University Center for Collaborative Brain Research. It's featuring speaker Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor. She's the author of The Grieving Brain, The Surprising Science of How We Learn from Our Love and Loss. If you want to get more information regarding registration, contact Gwen Hoarter. She's at GHOWARTER at bradley.edu, or call her at 309-677-3900. If you want more information regarding programming, you can contact Dr. Lori Russell Chapin herself at 309-677-3186, or email lar@bradley.edu.
So
You brought up Susan and AI. Dr. Rogene West, she seems to have a background in AI. Trying to get her chiseled into the show, Jay. What is her background on AI? She seemed to be ahead of the curve on this.
yeah, she's been into research and kind of came out of research into some clinical work for a while, but has gone back in as a head of a lab in the Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest area, and she's a serious researcher and well published. And AI is another interesting topic. I mean, generative AI is a little different than simple machine learning kind of stuff that has been around for quite a while. And the generative AI is the chat AI kind of stuff that can actually write things and create photos that are photorealistic but totally synthetic.
Right.
And that's how you end up seeing the Pope in a white puffer jacket. So that's not a picture of the Pope. He would not do that.
I think people have to realize ChatGPT. It's a hyped up chatbot. Chatbots have been around a long time.
Yeah.
When
I have to say, it was asked by Erno Delorum, who wrote most of the code for EEG Lab. How would I import EEG into EEG Lab and process it? And it went through perfectly, step by step. This is how you would import it, and this is how you would segment it into epochs, and this is how you would filter throughout some epochs that were really bad epochs, and then AI, ICA, the rest of the epochs, and so really a very nice job of spitting back the instructions that you might find online. And there's plenty of YouTubes and whatnot of that topic online. So it did a nice job. But I also saw one where somebody asked it about thalamocortical dysrhythmia. What is thalamocortical dysrhythmia? Now, I happen to know a little bit about that, and having lectured about it and all of that. So, I would, if I was a professor in a class and somebody handed it in as a short, descriptive 1-page, 2-page write up on something, I would have given it a C- and been scratching my head whether it might have been a better D. This was not really quality work, and it apparently fabricates references and things such as that. It wasn't really dead on by any means. Now, I don't know where it found. I mean, there are papers out there, about the topic, and if they would have had proper sources, they might have done a better job or something. But on its own, I don't know where it searched Google or something for the background information. It wasn't even up to the quality of a wiki.
Yeah. Well, Jay, I think it's sort of like neurofeedback. It's training. Like, you hit the regenerate response. It's just training to get the right or better outcome, right? So it's just people like you that know what you're doing. Somebody's going to have to go in there and say, ask the question and then, give the answer. The other thing is, I believe Stanford spent $600 and they made their own AI ChatGPT. So I think businesses out there can do it themselves. So
Yeah,
I'm
I'm sure that there's going to be like machine learning.
yeah.
Every university has their own machine learning algorithm that they use, and every one of them has a little tweak based on the department's specialty. But there's going to be lots of options out there. It's just that's the way it is in science. But
Well,
that it was also asked, um, can you read clinical EEGs and tell us if they're normal or abnormal, and read the EEG clinically? And if not, what would it take to be able to do that? And basically, it said no, can't. And to be able to do that, you'd have to gather lots and lots and lots of EEGs to scan, and the lots and lots of EEGs would have to be with everything, not just epilepsy or just, I mean, you'd have to have depression and everything. The whole population from normal to clinical would have to be scanned. And
so all the neurofeedback people got to put in their EEGs, take the identifiers out of who the people are and deposit it in one place, because that's the constraint, is the databases are locked down, right?
yeah, the databases are have been oriented towards trying to find healthy, normal people as a reference population, which is good for one purpose in clinical work. But for the AI to be able to do diagnostics, it would have to have the full population exposure so that it could identify the patterns of various clusters, and that's what it's reasonably good at doing. Um, uh, Stanford had their own AI, and Emmett Aitken spun out of Stanford with grants to do this project. And they basically, Stanford had 37,000 EEGs already digitized and ready to go. But the problem is that these were all clinical EEGs done in hospitals for epilepsy and encephalopathy, the things you can diagnose with EEG. And they tell you, oh, don't do EEGs on ADD. It's not helpful. Well, it is, but they don't know how to use it. It's not diagnostic in neurology. This is neuropsychology, not neurology. And so they basically don't have all of the richness of the psychiatric world's EEGs, which they would basically dismiss as not abnormal. There's no epilepsy. There's no encephalopathy. You're depressed or you're anxious or you're ADD or autistic. That not particularly the kind of things that they record. So they didn't have the ability to actually do AI scrubbing of data and come up with the ability to diagnose. The same pipe dream happened in Israel. A company in Israel had their own AI. They turned it loose on a whole bunch of EEG data, and were kind of underwhelmed by the lack of
Yeah.
utility in the output. Um, it took me 500,000 or more EEGs to start to see patterns within the EEG and identify the endophenotypic patterns that weren't yet identified with genetics, and now they've been even linked to the genetic patterns. So it's possible to have some flawed version of intelligence, as the skin version, scrub large quantities of data and pull out things. Um, I'm sure that they will at some time, but getting it from here to there, the AI basically said, number one, get me everything so I can digest it. Number two, get me an AI programmer who knows how to operate AI real well to help train me on that data, and get me a good EEG person who can classify normal, abnormal, various patterns. And that's what it would be. It would be required for it to start to emulate a clinical interpretation. So they're a long ways away.
Yeah.
I'm too old to worry about them replacing me. That's for sure. They're decades off in the ability yet to supplant a good set of eyes with somebody who's experienced.
Right.
Although it's hard to find a good set of eyes with somebody who's experienced. That's the difficulty.
Well, AI's been around a long time. Chatbots have been around a long time. Now it's hit the general population. Now it's like, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. And back when I was playing with it in the business world, my goal was to eliminate low value recurring activities and replace them with higher value activities, push that stuff down. So the humans are working on more important things, not on less important things,
Yeah.
So we'll see.
That will end up probably happening. That there'll be assistive tooling basically in offices. But it's already in medicine. Machine learning has looked at images, and they've gotten really good at identifying subtle findings in images that the average doctor may not be able to have spotted, that the really super expert may have, but it's nice to have the computer find something and point at it and kind of assist in image review. And at some point, the image of EEG itself will be something that it will be able to look at.
Well, I think the goal is to, get it to 80% and to have the humans figure out the other 20% and make sure that 20% is the important stuff,
Well,
if it's possible, I don't know.
It's going to be a long time before that's even feasible for EEG. For EKG, they basically have computer analysis for EKG now.
Yeah.
Atrial fibrillation, PVCs, PATs, Wolf Parkinson White. It'll classify all sorts of rhythm disturbances by Gemini. What all the various patterns are stuff that will be identified. That's a piece of cake. But the EEG is a whole different level of complexity. So,
Jay Gunkelman, thank you for this AI influenced NeuroNoodle podcast.
I'll stick with the old skin version myself. So.
Of course you will. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you, like our gold supporter, the 7th Annual Super Brain Summit at Bradley University, and our silver supporter, Mind Media. Join us at the 7th Annual Super Brain Summit at Bradley University Center for Collaborative Brain Research. It's featuring speaker Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor. She's the author of The Grieving Brain, The Surprising Science of How We Learn from Our Love and Loss. If you want to get more information regarding registration, contact Gwen Hoarter. She's at GHOWARTER at bradley.edu, or call her at 309-677-3900. If you want more information regarding programming, you can contact Dr. Lori Russell Chapin herself at 309-677-3186 or email lar@bradley.edu. Mindmedia.com. Get the latest EEG and neurofeedback technology from mindmedia.com. Their semi-dry sensor cap is a wonder to see, and their EEG amplifiers have been trusted in the field for decades. Their Neurofeedback and QEEG courses will get you up to speed in no time. Visit mindmedia.com now.